And with that, I'm so grateful to have Ms. Deborah Henry here to speak to us.
Just raise this mic a little. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank VOC for inviting me, for having me here this evening. It really is such an honor to be part of this launch, and I really look forward to seeing the video. It also is very special because Teeny's a very dear friend, and her daughter, she's actually done something very generous, something that very few mothers perhaps would do, and actually share her story with her daughter in this video. So I think it's very commendable, and a huge respect goes out to you for this, because it sends a very strong message to the world about what it means to be stateless. The population of our world is 7 billion. 45 million people are forcibly displaced due to conflict and persecution. Out of that, 15 million are refugees, and 27 million are internally displaced people. Children make up about 41% of the world's refugees. And displaced and stateless people exist in over 72 countries. The numbers are of course staggering and honestly very overwhelming. A seemingly insurmountable local and global issue. We all know our world is complex, and our one Malaysia is just as complex. Thank you. But what is the point of thinking big? What is the point of unity and togetherness if we as individuals can't get our one-on-one relationships right? If our idea of unity is simply tolerance, putting up with something or someone, then that's a very dangerous place to be. Do we know how to treat one another with love, with respect, with honor, with kindness, and with favor? How do we treat someone of a different race, religion, and background? And should we even need to ask ourselves these questions? Despite circumstances, can we genuinely look beyond differences? And can we as individuals come together in communities to do the right thing, to serve one another with love? I love traveling. I grew up in a mixed family, so my mother is Irish, my father is Malaysian, and I was able to go home every summer to Ireland to see my family. And now in hindsight, I can see that I developed a very natural sense of diversity. I understood and appreciated the differences in how people lived, in how they prayed, in how they thought. And this intrigued me. It didn't scare me or make me feel insecure. To me, traveling opens your eyes, your heart, your mind, and your soul. And as World Vision, which is an international organization, as their children's rights advocate, I've had the huge privilege of going to Lebanon. I went there last year to visit the Syrian refugees who'd made it across the border from Syria into Lebanon. And I sat in these tented homes of some of the refugees and listened to their stories, desperate families, their stories of horror, of desperation, of distress. And there was this woman crying to me in Arabic, and she was just shocked that her government, that her people, her own people, could do this to her, could kill their own people, and she was living on the outskirts of Lebanon. And the brother turned around to her and said to her, "Sister, save your tears, for there will be worse days ahead." And you're sitting on the floor in their home listening to this conversation going on in between them, and to think that this is a reality for millions of people, that there literally is no one to think about them, no one to protect them, and no one they can go to unless an NGO or a kind individual turns up on their doorstep. We visited another family. It was a mother together with her 4 children, and they were living literally in the middle of nowhere. No access to education, doctors, healthcare, shop, nothing around them, in the middle of barren land, basically. And we asked her where her husband was. So she said her husband had left the family there and gone to look for a job and for other relatives. Their journey from Syria over to Lebanon was a nightmare. Literally, I can't think of a worse word, but it was her carrying her 5-year-old daughter who had been killed with a stray bullet in her arms, together with her 5 children as they made it over, and burying her daughter less than 100 meters from her existing tent home in Lebanon. And this was a journey she made, but instead of being able to grieve, and she was pregnant at this time as well, instead of being able to grieve a loss of a child, she was being strong for the sake of 4 other children and carrying on without anything. So this is the hard, cold face of what it means to be stateless, what it means to be internally displaced or a refugee in many parts of the world. And we ask ourselves is why innocent people should have to suffer and be victims of political interests and greed, and this is something we see all over the world. But we don't have to jump on a plane and fly halfway across the world to see examples of statelessness. We can just drive 30 minutes from our home. Last night I had the huge privilege of being invited to an Afghan refugee home to have dinner with the family, and they laid out an amazing traditional Afghan feast on the floor of their home. So we sat there together with the family and we shared stories and spoke about what it meant to be an Afghan refugee right here in Kuala Lumpur. And I was talking to some of the girls who are very lucky, in fact, because there was an American man who was very generous and he sponsored the 4 of them to go to a private school here in Malaysia so they could get an education. And to see the difference in what an education meant to these very young children, 12, 13, 14, the fact that they understood the value of what it meant to actually be able to go to school and to learn, and that can break the cycle that their family is currently in, where no one earns money and no one's employed. They're connected with Pandawas Academy, which is a school that focuses mainly on teaching Afghan refugees here in Ampang, and now they moved on to a private school to learn. It's funny how we always talk about food, about shelter, and clothing as necessary for the survival of a child. But with no education, children have no fighting chance in today's world. And in the Fugee School, which is a refugee school that I co-founded 5 years ago, we see the direct effects of displacement in our children. Most of them are from Somalia. We work so hard to build them up, their confidence, their self-esteem, their self-worth, so that they decide to have goals of their own and to have dreams and to want to live a very full life. But it really can be a very steep mountain to climb sometimes, because the reality is their lives here are very, very difficult. And in waiting to be resettled, the uncertainty demotivates them. We try to get them to put it on its head, to go, yes, you're a refugee, but don't let that be a word that victimizes you. Let that be something that empowers you, because you've come from Somalia, you're living in Malaysia, you have great adaptability, flexibility, you know how to make things work in very difficult circumstances. Use this as your advantage and share your story with others, and this will make you special and this will make you stand out. And we work really hard to get them to see this, but when you're young, when you're demotivated, when you have no foreseeable future in sight, I think all of us would probably feel pretty depressed. There are siblings, Ahmad and Kamal. They've been with us since 2008, and 6 years later they're still here and they're still hanging on. Resettlement was meant to be last year, and then it was delayed, and then it's now meant to be in May of this year, but I don't know if they're going anywhere anytime soon. And they feel frustrated and they feel confused. And anytime they leave the confinements of their 4 walls, it comes with the risk of being randomly detained. And then there's that additional fear that they have to deal with every day. And now one of the boys has ended up quite depressed. He's lost his appetite, and his zest for life is gone, and he doesn't really come to school and doesn't really help out with anything. So now our struggle is, well, how do we pull him, how do we save this kid before he's lost in Malaysia with us, and in which case, when he moves on, it may just be too late. In a while, we're going to see a few stories of people and children living here in Malaysia as stateless individuals, and hear their very real daily challenges that they face. And hopefully, as individuals all here today, coming together, we've seen the impossible be achieved here in many ways with many organizations here today. So hopefully with all of us coming together, becoming a community, fighting the same cause, we can find ways to do the right thing, which is to give everyone the right to have a very full life, right here in Malaysia and all around the world. Thank you so much.